Happy Friday. Oh, if someone's the puppy. He's like, I know that sound. That sound means snack. Happy Friday, Ben. Happy Friday. Oh, Ksente. Oh, Ksente. You alright? You good? What's new? You see many of the usual lurker names in the chat. It is a kind of a weird time right now. Strange sort of limbo for Farmos and I of like waiting to see whether or not we have sold our house, but still for some reason showing our house to other people in case I guess we haven't sold our house. But maybe we have sold our house. We don't know. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. Much better limbo than before. Much better than just we have not sold our house. Now it's a maybe we've sold our house. I accidentally closed my chat window on a thing. I can still see chat in a different place, but I accidentally closed it where I would normally have it. That should be what I want. Maybe. That's not it. No. Give me my chat back. Sharkies, hello! Salutations! How are you? Happy Friday. Anything new since Wednesday? Sorry, I'm kind of staring over here and just clicking. It's because I'm trying to... I closed a chat window over on my side of things. I'm trying to figure out how to put it back. I guess I can figure it out later. It's not vital. I can still see the chat in other places. Yay, IKEA. Boo, IKEA. I don't actually dislike IKEA. I was there to visit friends. Do your friends live in IKEA? Or did they just invite you along for a shopping trip? They have lingonberry sundaes. Yeah, nothing really against IKEA. It's just one of those places where like I step inside an IKEA and all of my energy drains out of my body and I immediately feel like I need to sit down or I'm going to collapse. I don't know if it's the lighting or what, but I'm like I'm like, okay, all right, let's go to IKEA. Let's get some stuff. This will be good. We're here to get some stuff. That's good. And then I step inside and I'm just, oh, what am I doing? They were picking up some stuff. I see. You hear stories about people living in IKEAs. Before you showed up, I was just saying that Hermos and I are in kind of a weird limbo right now of like, we don't 100% know whether we've actually sold our house or not. So we're still, like, we still have 2 showings tomorrow. But if we have sold our house, then these showings are pointless. We can't even, like, even if they offered more money, we can't take advantage of it because we've already agreed to, this other group. But if the other group decides that they no longer want to buy our house, then I guess these showings have a purpose in that, if then these people decide they want the place, then they're like a backup offer. But it's a weird, like, we still have to clean our house and get out of the place twice tomorrow. I mean, we have to clean it once, but we have to stay out of it for multiple times or the whole day or whatever. And it could just be a big waste of everybody's time. So the 14th cannot come soon enough. The 14th is the day that we will know for sure. If not before then, it's possible before then, but I feel like I'm gonna have some like low-level background anxiety until this is done, until it's set in stone. Puppy! Ooh. Ooh. Puppy. You're a puppy. He knows. We tell him all the time. You know, right? You know you're a puppy. Ooh, puppy. Yeah, a week. A week today. We should know. 7 days. I mean, tomorrow we've got house showings, and the day after that we're going out to Farmhouse's family for Easter dinner. So then it's really just, 5 days after that. And I've got a physio consultation on the next Wednesday, which is sort of weird timing now that I think about it. And it's going to be like selling the house and then going to Japan. Not really going to have time to actually go to physio. I could Practice? Oh. Yeah. Well, anyways. So last time it was almost entirely just a section of the Wizard of Oz. Well, first we had an argument between, a kind of a nasty argument between Granny and Magrat. That's always fun in media, books and shows and things. I love when there's a divisive argument. Could have been worse. The group did not physically split up. The argument was pretty decisively ended by a farmhouse falling on Nanny Ogg's head. It worked well as a setup for the Wizard of Oz jokes. You getting comfy over there? Sitting kind of sideways. He sort of sat in a strange way. He's got his legs like curled under to one side. What? I'm a little sleepy. Snack? Oh, he heard that. Did you hear me say snack? Yeah. We met some dwarfs. Definitely not munchkins. And they were lured into the farmhouse with the promise of dwarf bread. That's roughly where we left off. So I think I'm just going to get into it, because I'm a little sleepy. So maybe I'll start a little earlier and end a little earlier today. Dear Jason et everybody, what a life! All kinds of things going on. What with talking wolves and women asleep in castles, I shall have a story or two to tell you when I gets back, and no mistake. Also, don't talk to me about farmhouses, which reminds me, please send someone to Mr. Vernissage over in Slice and present Mrs. Ogg's compliments and what a good hat he makes. He can say, as approved by Nanny Ogg. It stops 100% of all known farmhouses. Also, if you write to people saying how good their stuff is, sometimes you get free stuff. There could be a new hat in this for me, so see to it. It stops 100% of all known farmhouses. Lilith stepped out from her room of mirrors. Shadowy images of herself trailed after her, fading. Witches ought to be squashed when a farmhouse lands on them. Lilith knew that. All squashed except for their boots sticking out. That's going on the hat tag. Nice. So this was a targeted farmhouse. all squashed except for their boots sticking out. Sometimes she despaired. People just didn't seem able to play their parts properly. She wondered whether there was such a thing as the opposite of a fairy godmother. Most things had their opposite, after all. If so, she wouldn't be a bad fairy godmother, because that's just a good fairy godmother seen from a different viewpoint. The opposite would be someone who was poison to stories, and, thought Lilith, quite the most evil creature in the world. Well, here in Genua was one story no one could stop. It had momentum, this one. Try to stop it, and it'd absorb you, make you part of its plot. She didn't have to do a thing. The story would do it for her. And she had the comfort of knowing that she couldn't lose. After all, she was the good one. Well. She strolled along the battlements and down the stairs to her own room, where the two sisters were waiting. They were good at waiting. They could sit for hours without blinking. The Duc refused even to be in the same room as them. Their heads turned as she came in. She'd never given them voices. It wasn't necessary. It was enough that they were beautiful and could be made to understand. Well, this is creepy. Now, you must go to the house, she said. And this is very important. Listen to me. Some people will be coming to see Ella tomorrow. You must let them do so. Do you understand? They were watching her lips. They watched anything that moved. We shall need them for the story. It won't work properly unless they try to stop it. And afterward, perhaps I will give you voices. You'll like that, won't you? They looked at one another, and then at her, and then at the cage in the corner of the room. Lilith smiled, and reached in, and took out 2 white mice. The youngest witch might be just your type, she said. I shall have to see what I can do with her. And now, open. Creepy. The broomsticks drifted through the afternoon air. For once, the witches weren't arguing. The dwarfs had been a taste of home. It would have done anyone's heart good to see the way they just sat and stared at the dwarf bread, as if consuming it with their eyes, which was the best way to consume dwarf bread. Whatever it was that had driven them to seek ruby-colored boots seemed to wear off under its down-to-earth influence. As Granny said, you could look a long way before you found anything realer than dwarf bread. Then she'd gone off alone to talk to the head dwarf. She wouldn't tell the others what he'd told her, and they didn't feel bold enough to ask. Now she flew a little ahead of them. Occasionally she'd mutter something like, "Godmothers!" or "practicing." But even Magrat, who hadn't had as much experience, could feel Genua now, as a barometer feels the air pressure. In Genua, stories came to life. In Genua, someone set out to make dreams come true. Remember some of your dreams? Genua nestled on the delta of the Vieux River, which was the source of its wealth. And Genua was wealthy. Genua had once controlled the river mouth and taxed its traffic in a way that couldn't be called piracy because it was done by the city government, and therefore sound economics and perfectly all right. And the swamps and lakes back in the delta provided the crawling, swimming, and flying ingredients of a cuisine that would have been world famous if, as has already been indicated, people traveled very much. Genua was rich, lazy, and unthreatened, and had once spent quite a lot of time involved in that special kind of civic politics that comes naturally to some city-states. For example, once it had been able to afford the largest branch of the Assassins' Guild outside Ankh-Morpork, and its members were so busy that you sometimes had to wait for months. Footnote. Which reads, whereas, in Ankh-Morpork, business was often so slow that some of the more go-ahead guild members put adverts in shop windows offering deals like stab 2, poison 1 free. End of footnote. But the assassins had all left years ago. Some things sicken even jackals. The city came as a shock. From a distance, it looked like a complicated white crystal growing out of the greens and browns of the swamp. Closer to, it resolved into, firstly, an outer ring of smaller buildings, then an inner ring of large, impressive white houses, and, finally, at the very center, a palace. It was tall and pretty and multi-turreted, like a toy castle or some kind of confectionery extravaganza. Every slim tower looked designed to hold a captive princess. Magrat shivered. But then she thought of the wand. A godmother had responsibilities.
Reminds me of another one of them Black Alice stories,
said Granny Weatherwax.
I remember when she locked up that girl with the long pigtails in a tower just like one of them. Rumpelstiltsel or someone.
But she got out, said Magrat. Yes, it does you good to let your hair down, said Nanny.
Ha! Rural myths,
said Granny. They drew nearer to the city walls. Then Magrat said, There's guards on the gate. Are we going to fly over? Granny stared at the highest tower through narrowed eyes.
No,
she said.
We'll land and walk in, so's not to worry people.
There's a nice flat green bit just behind those trees, said Magrat. Yes, and? Granny walked up and down experimentally. Her boots squeaked and gurgled in watery accusation. Look, I said I'm sorry, said Magrat. It just looked so flat. Water generally does, said Nanny. sitting on a tree stump and wringing out her dress. "But even you couldn't tell it was water," said Magrat. "It looks so grassy with all that weed and stuff floating on it."
"Seems to me the land and the water around here can't decide who is which,"
said Nanny. She looked around at the miasmic landscape. Trees grew out of the swamp. They had a jagged, foreign look and seemed to be rotting as they grew. Where the water was visible, it was black like ink. Occasionally, a few bubbles would eructate to the surface like the ghosts of beans on bath night. That's gotta be, like, the most graceful fart joke I've ever heard. The ghosts of beans on bath night. That's amazing. Wow. How indeed. Brings to mind the bog of eternal stench. Oh, wow. The ghosts of beans on bath night. And somewhere over in the distance was the river. If it was possible to be that sure in this land of thick water and ground that wobbled when you set foot on it. She blinked.
"That's odd,"
she said.
What?
Said Granny.
"Thought I saw something running,"
Muttered Nanny.
"over there, between the trees."
Must be a duck, then, in this place.
"It was bigger than a duck.
Said Nanny.
Funny thing is, it looked a bit like a little house."
Oh, yes. Running along with smoke coming out of the chimney, I expect.
Said Granny witheringly. Nanny brightened.
"You saw it too?"
Granny rolled her eyes.
Come on,
She said.
let's get to the road.
Said Magrat. How? They looked at the nominal ground between their reasonably dry refuge and the road. It had a yellowish appearance. There were floating branches and tufts of suspiciously green grass. Nanny pulled a branch off the fallen tree she was sitting on and tossed it a few yards. It struck damply and sank with the noise of someone trying to get the last bit out of the milkshake.
"We fly over to it, of course,"
Nanny said.
You two can,
Said Granny.
There's nowhere for me to run and get mine started.
In the end, Magrat ferried her across on her broom, Nanny bringing up the rear with Granny's erratic stick in tow.
I just hope no one saw us, that's all,
Said Granny, when they'd reached the comparative safety of the road. Other roads joined the swamp causeway as they got nearer to the city. They were crowded, and there was a long line at the gate. From ground level, the city was even more impressive. Against the steam of the swamps, it shone like a polished stone. Colored flags flew over the walls.
Looks very jolly,
said Nanny. Very clean, said Magrat.
It just looks like that from outside,
said Granny, who had seen a city before.
When you get inside, it'll be all beggars and noise and gutters full of I don't know what. You mark my words.
They're turning quite a lot of people away,
said Nanny.
They said on the boat that lots of people come here for fat lunchtime,
said Granny. I love that that's what it's called now.
Probably you get lots of people who ain't the right sort.
Half a dozen guards watched them approach.
Very smartly turned out,
said Granny.
That's what I like to see, not like at home.
There were only 6 suits of chainmail in the whole of Lancre, made on the basis of one size doesn't quite fit all. Bits of string and wire had to be employed to take in the slack, since in Lancre the role of palace guard was generally taken by any citizen who hadn't got much to do at the moment. These guards were all 6-footers, and, even Granny had to admit, quite impressive in their jolly red and blue uniforms. The only other real city guards she'd ever seen were those in Ankh-Morpork. The sight of Ankh-Morpork's city guard made thoughtful people wonder who could possibly attack that was worse. They certainly weren't anything to look at. To her amazement, 2 pikes barred her way as she stepped under the arched gateway.
We're not attacking, you know,
she said. A corporal gave her a salute.
No, ma'am, he said, but we have orders to stop borderline cases.
Borderline?
Said Nanny.
What's borderline about us?
The corporal swallowed. Granny Weatherwax's gaze was a hard one to meet.
Well, he said, you're a bit grubby.
There was a ringing silence. Granny took a deep breath. We had a bit of an accident in the swamp, said Magrat quickly.
I'm sure it'll be all right, said the corporal wretchedly. The captain'll be here directly. Only there's all kinds of trouble if we let the wrong sort in. You'd be amazed at some of the people we get here.
Can't go letting the wrong sort in,
said Nanny Og.
We wouldn't want you to let the wrong sort in. I dare say we wouldn't want to come into the kind of city that'd let the wrong sort in, would we, Esme?
Magrat kicked her on the ankle.
Good thing we're the right sort,
said Nanny.
What's happening, Corporal?
The captain of the guard strolled out of a door in the archway and walked over to the witches.
These ladies want to come in, sir,
said the corporal.
Well, they're a bit, you know, not 100% clean,
said the corporal, wilting under Granny's stare.
And one of them's got messy hair.
Well, snapped Magrat.
And One of them looks like she uses bad language.
What?
Said Nanny, her grin evaporating.
Well, turn your hide, you little bugger!
But, Corporal, they have got brooms, said the captain. It's very hard for cleaning staff to look tidy all the time. Cleaning staff, said Granny. I'm sure they're as anxious as you are to get tidied up, said the captain. Excuse me, said Granny, empowering the words with much the same undertones as are carried by words like charge and kill. Excuse me, but does this pointy hat I'm wearing mean anything to you? The soldiers looked at it politely. Can you give me a clue? Said the captain, eventually. It means...
Well, just trot along in, if it's all the same to you,
said Nanny Ogg.
Got a lot of cleaning up to do.
She flourished her broomstick.
Come, ladies.
She and Magrat grasped Granny's elbows firmly and propelled her under the archway before her fuse burned out. Granny Weatherwax always held that you ought to count up to 10 before losing your temper. No one knew why, because the only effect of this was to build up the pressure and make the ensuing explosion a whole lot worse. The witches didn't stop until they were out of sight of the gate.
Now, Esme,
said Nanny soothingly,
you shouldn't take it personal. And we are a bit mucky, you must admit. They were just doing their job, all right. How about that?
They treated us as if we was ordinary people, said Granny in a shocked voice. This is foreign parts, Granny, said Magrat. Anyway, you said the men on the boat didn't recognize the hat either. But then I didn't want 'em to, said Granny. That's different. It's just an incident, Granny, said Magrat. They were just stupid soldiers. They don't even know a proper free-form hairstyle when they see it. Nanny looked around. Crowds milled past them, almost in silence.
And you must admit it's a nice, clean city, she said.
They took stock of their surroundings. It was certainly the cleanest place they'd ever seen. Even the cobblestones had a polished look.
You could eat your tea off the street,
said Nanny as they strolled along. Yes, but you'd eat your tea off the street anyway, said Granny.
I wouldn't eat all of it. Even the gutters are scrubbed. Not a Ronald in sight, look.
Footnote on Ronald. Ronald the Third of Lancre, believed to be an extremely unpleasant monarch, was remembered by posterity only in this obscure bit of rhyming slang. End of footnote. Even the gutters are scrubbed, not a Ronald in sight. Remembered only in this obscure bit of rhyming slang. Yeah, no, I... Oh, Ronald the Turd, you think? That could be it. I was trying to think of something that rhymed with Ronald, not with the third. I guess that makes sense, like Ronald the Third, Ronald the Turd, and then just gets shortened to Ronald.
not a Ronald in sight look.
Gither. Well, you said that in Ankh-Morpork. This is somewhere else.
It's so spotless, said Magrat. Makes you wish you'd cleaned your sandals.
Yeah,
Nanny-Og squinted along the street.
makes you wish you were a better person, really.
Why are you two whispering?
Said Granny. She followed their gaze. There was a guard standing on the street corner. When he saw them looking at him, he touched his helmet and gave them a brief smile. Even the guards are polite, said Magrat.
And there's so many of them, too,
said Granny. Amazing, really, needing all these guards in a city where people are so clean and quiet, said Magrat.
Perhaps there's so much niceness to be spread around, they need a lot of people to do it,
said Nanny-Og. The witches wandered through the packed streets. Nice houses, though, said Magrat. Very decorative and old world. Old and world both have E's on the end. Oldie worldy. Granny Weatherwax, who lived in a cottage that was as old world as it was possible to be without being a lump of metamorphic rock, made no comment. Nanny-Og's feet started to complain.
We ought to find somewhere to stop the night, she said. We can look for this girl in the morning. We'll all do a lot better for a good night's sleep.
And a bath, said Magrat, with soothing herbs.
Good idea. I could just go a bath too, said Nanny.
My word, doesn't autumn roll around quickly?
Said Granny sourly.
Yeah? When did you last have a bath, Esme?
What do you mean last?
See? Then there's no call to make comments about my ablutions.
Baths is unhygienic,
Granny declared.
You know I've never agreed with baths. Sitting around in your own dirt like that.
What do you do, then? Said Magrat.
I just washes,
said Granny.
All the bits, you know, as and when they becomes available.
What? What? Did you send him, or did he hear that gentle rattling? Lily Faye, hello! Oh, man. We're reading Riches Abroad. I'm not sure if it means as they get dirty or as they get exposed. Hello, good book. Yes. We have just arrived in Genua. Have we talked to you at all about the Christmas card, Lily Faye? We sent you a Christmas card, and then just like a month and a half ago or something, we got it back because wrong address or something like that. So, very sorry that you didn't get one this past year. How have you been? inside of another card. A sorry this took so long to get to you card. Alright, so Granny washes all the bits as and when they becomes available. However available they were, and no further information was vouchsafed on this point, they were certainly more available than accommodation in Genua in fat lunchtime. All the taverns and inns were more than full. Gradually, the press of crowds pushed them out of the main streets and into the less fashionable quarters of the city. But still there was no room for the three of them. Granny Weatherwax had had enough.
The very next place we see,
she said, setting her jaw firmly,
we're going in. What's that inn over there?
Nanny Ogg peered at the sign.
Hotel No Vacancies,
she muttered, and then brightened up.
Hotel Nova Vacancies,
she repeated. Nova Cancies.
That means new Cancies. In foreign,
she added helpfully.
It'll do,
said Granny. She pushed open the door. A round, red-faced man looked up from the desk. He was new to the job and very nervous. The last incumbent had disappeared for not being round and red-faced enough. Granny didn't waste time.
You see this hat?
She demanded.
You see this broom?
The man looked from her to the broom and back again.
Yes,
he said.
What's that mean? Means we want 3 rooms for the night,
said Granny, looking smugly at the other two.
With sausage,
said Nanny. And 1 vegetarian meal, said Magrat. The man looked at all 3 of them. Then he went over to the door.
You see this door? You see this sign?
He said.
We don't bother about signs,
said Granny.
Well then,
said the man,
I give up. What's a pointy hat and a broom really mean? That means I'm a witch,
said Granny. The man put his head on one side.
Yeah,
he said.
Is that another word for daft old woman?
Dear Jason and everyone,
wrote Nanny Ogg.
Do you know, they don't know about witches here. That's how backward,
Bakcward,
they are in foreign parts. A man gave Esme some cheek, and she would have lost her temper. So me and Magrat and I got hold of her and rushed her out, because if you make someone think they've been turned into something, there's always trouble. You remember what happened last time, when afterward you had to go and dig a pond for Mr. Wilkins to live in?
Me and Magrat and I. They had managed to find a table to themselves in a tavern. It was packed with people of all species. The noise was at shouting level, and smoke wreathed the air.
Will you stop that scribbling, Githa Og? It gets on my nerves,
snapped Granny. They must have witches here, said Magrat. Everywhere has witches. You've got to have witches abroad. You find witches everywhere. Title drop.
Like cockroaches. cockroaches,
said Nanny Ogg cheerfully.
You should have let me make him believe he was a frog,
muttered Granny.
You can't do that, Esme. You can't go around making people believe their things just because they've been cheeky and don't know who you are,
said Githa.
Otherwise we'd be up to here and people hopping about.
Despite many threats, Granny Weatherwax had never turned anyone into a frog. The way she saw it, there was a technically less cruel, but cheaper and much more satisfying thing you could do. You could leave them human and make them think they were a frog, which also provided much innocent entertainment for passers-by. I always felt sorry for Mr. Wilkins, said Magrat, staring moodily at the tabletop. It was so sad watching him try to catch flies on his tongue.
He shouldn't have said what he said,
said Granny.
What, that you were a domineering old busybody?
said Nanny innocently.
I don't mind criticism,
said Granny.
You know me. I've never been one to take offense at criticism. No one could say I'm the sort to take offense at criticism.
Not twice, anyway,
said Nanny.
Not without blowing bubbles.
It's just that I can't stand unfairness,
said Granny.
And you stop that grinning. Anyway, I don't see why you're making a fuss about it. It wore off after a couple of days.
Mrs. Wilkins says he still goes out swimming a lot, said Magrat. It's given him a whole new interest, she said. Weird, there's two sort of separate bits from Magrat in mine here. Is it Magrat both in your copy? Perhaps they have a different kind of witch in the city, said Magrat hopelessly. Perhaps they wear different sort of clothes.
There's only one kind of witch,
said Granny.
And we're it.
She looked around the room. There's definitely more than one kind of witch. Even just in the three of them, Magrat's sort of a different kind of witch. At least somewhat. And we've heard about some other witches that seemed a little different. In their neck of the woods. She looked around the room. Of course, she thought, if someone was keeping witches out, people wouldn't know about them. Someone who didn't want anyone else meddling here. But she let us in.
Oh, well, at least we're in the dry, said Nanny.
A drinker standing in a crowd behind her threw back his head to laugh and spilled beer down her back. She muttered something under her breath. Magrat saw the man look down to take another swig and stare, wide-eyed, into the mug. Then he dropped it and fought his way out of the room, clutching at his throat. There's an odd bit here. It just says, "What did you do to his drink?" she said. Which presumably is Magrat, but it's some of the... I wonder if the editing, if this section went through some strange editing, because there's been a couple of things just in the past page that have felt kind of off. Funny thing too, the page that's on the lettering... The page that's on the lettering is not as thick as the rest of the book. I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, like...
I suppose I kind of get what you mean. Yeah, I'm thinking there was some weird editing that happened in this section. Because a couple of things have felt just slightly off. The whole page font is thinner on that page. Oh, weird. Alright, so he stared wide-eyed into the mug, then he dropped it and fought his way out of the room, clutching at his throat. "What did you do to his drink?" she said.
You ain't old enough to be told,
said Nanny. At home, if a witch wanted a table to herself, it just happened. The sight of the pointy hat was enough. People kept a polite distance, occasionally sending free drinks to her. Even Magrat got respect, not particularly because anyone was in awe of her, but because a slight to one witch was a slight to all witches, and no one wanted Granny Weatherwax coming around to explain this to them. Here they were being jostled, as if they were ordinary. Only Nanny Ogg's warning hand on Granny Weatherwax's arm was keeping a dozen jovial drinkers from unnatural amphibianhood. And even Nanny's usually very elastic temper was beginning to twang. She always prided herself on being as ordinary as muck, but there was ordinary and there was ordinary. It was like being that Prince What's-His-Name in the nursery story, who liked to wander around his kingdom dressed up as a commoner. She'd always had a shrewd suspicion that the little pervert made sure people knew who he was beforehand, just in case anyone tried to get too common. It was like getting muddy. Getting muddy when you had a nice hot tub to look forward to was fun. Getting muddy when all you had to look forward to was more mud was no fun at all. She reached a conclusion.
Hey, why don't we have a drink?
Said Nanny Ogg brightly.
We'd all feel better for a drink.
Oh no, said Granny. You caught me with that herbal drink last time. I'm sure there was alcohol in that. I definitely felt a bit woozy after the 6th glass. I ain't drinking any more foreign muck.
You've got to drink something, said Magrat soothingly. I'm thirsty anyway. She looked vaguely at the crowded bar. Perhaps they do some kind of fruit cup or something.
Bound to,
said Nanny Ogg. She stood up, glanced at the bar, and surreptitiously removed a hatpin from her hat.
Shan't be a moment.
Her hat has hatpins as well, which makes it extra dangerous. The two of them were left in their own private gloom. Granny sat staring fixedly in front of her. Keep that in mind. You really shouldn't take it so bad, just because people aren't showing you any respect, said Magrat, pouring soothing oil on the internal fires. They've hardly ever shown me any respect at all. It's not a problem.
If you ain't got respect, you ain't got a thing, said Granny distantly.
Oh, I don't know. I've always managed to get along, said Magrat.
That's 'cause you're a wet hen, Magrat Garlic, said Granny.
There was a short, hot silence, ringing with the words that shouldn't have escaped, and a few grunts of pained surprise from the direction of the bar. I know she's always thought that, Magrat told herself within the glowing walls of her embarrassment. I just never thought she'd ever say it. And she'll never say sorry, because that's not the kind of thing she does. She just expects people to forget things like that. I was just trying to be friends again. If she ever really has any friends.
Here we are, then,
said Nanny Og, emerging from the crush with a tray.
Fruit drinks.
She sat down and looked from one to the other.
Made from bananas,
she said, in the hope of striking a spark of interest from either woman.
I remember our Shane brought a banana home once. My, we had a good laugh about that. I said to the man, "What kind of fruit drinks do people drink around here?" And this is what he gave me. Made from bananas. A banana drink. You'll like it. It's what everyone drinks here. It's got bananas in it.
Space user. Hello. How are you? Space user. Oh, doggo, yes. This has been a bit. Oh, it says you're watching. Oh, weird. It says you're watching without audio for some reason, but apparently you can hear me. All right, this has been. We're reading Witches Abroad by Sir Terry Pratchett, and I'm Sleet. Hello. Precious. Yeah, he is super cute and sweet. Aren't you? Aren't you a cute puppy? Oh, thank you, Lily. Now, how am I tonight? I'm doing all right. I'm pretty good. Enjoying the book. A little sleepy. Oh, he's doing his pose, looking at me over his shoulder. And how are you? We just had a weird... That whole thing with Nanny going on about bananas was odd.
Bananas.
Did I? Twice? Yes, and they said, "I'm all right," and I just repeated myself. "I'm all right. How are you?" "All right." Yep. Apparently I am more sleepy than I thought I was. A little hungry, too. Got dinner coming. I'm going to have some Greek ribs. Haven't eaten that much. Why sleepy? It's just a perpetual state of being. I don't know. Yeah, it has been a busy month. We have been trying to sell the house for like half a year. And just on Wednesday, we got an accepted offer on the place. Which doesn't mean it's definitely sold, but it means it's pretty likely. We'll know for sure in a week. By next Friday. Yes. So basically we have to wait for them to remove the subjects, meaning that they're, everything's good on their end and they plan on purchasing the house. And then once that's done, we start moving all our stuff into storage. We start, packing and getting out of the place, and they take possession at the end of the month. And then May 2nd, going to Japan for 3 weeks. So I really hope that this works out, because everything will be much simpler if it does. I mean, it'll be complicated in that we'll be moving and then going to Japan, but it'll be simpler in the long run in that we won't have to figure out what to do with the place while we're in Japan, which is what we'll have to do if this doesn't go through, which would be complicated in a bad way. So really, Really hoping that everything works out. Space user wants a piece of my ribs, but I'm hungry. Ribs and potatoes and rice. So everything I think comes with it. You're hungry too? Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I'll email you some then. I decided. Well, there's a setup. Alright.
Got bananas in it.
I also hope we do. We're gonna spend about a week in Tokyo. So at that time, while we're there, I think, I mean, lots of stuff we're gonna want to do. While we're there, we're gonna try on this Sunday, we're gonna try to get tickets to the Ghibli Museum. We got the timing worked out, alarm set, so we're gonna try to get the tickets on Sunday. How would I rate it? Well, it's hilarious. It does get a little dark sometimes. Have you ever read Discworld? Any Discworld books by Sir Terry Pratchett? Because... Okay, so... Sir Terry's got a very particular sense of humor. There's a lot of satire in these books. It's like a fantasy setting with a lot of satire that pokes fun at real world things. This particular book pokes at a lot of like fairy tales and stories and things. So far we've had appearances of Sleeping Beauty, The Wizard of Oz, Little Red Riding Hood, a little bit of Hobbit, and yeah, what else? So there's different sort of sets of characters in these books that have their own series of stories, and the Witches books center on primarily two elderly witches, Granny Weatherwax and Nanny Og, and one younger witch, Magret Garlic. And they've got some particular personalities. Right now they are in the city of Genua, where which seems to be having a problem with stories coming to life. And quite probably somebody behind the scenes manipulating said stories. But yeah, in Japan, while we're in Tokyo, we're going to probably go to Harajuku, Akihabara, and hopefully the Ghibli Museum. And then we're going to go to Kyoto for the remainder of the trip for 2 weeks and out and around Kyoto, with a stop in at a hot spring hotel, a onsen, on the way there. I think it's on the way there. Hi. And then lots of stuff around Kyoto. We're going to do a sake tasting tour. Well, we're hoping to get to the Ghibli Museum. As far as we've heard, it's tricky to get tickets. There's a particular day each month where they become available, and you can only get them a month in advance. So you have to be on the ball ahead of time and buy tickets quickly, and because they sell out. So we're gonna try. It's this for our trip. It's gonna be this Sunday at 6 p.m. our time that we have to try and get the tickets. So hopefully it works. Also gonna spend some time in Osaka and Nara. Nara is where the deer are that you can buy cookies for, and they'll bow, and then you give them a cookie, and if you don't, they'll headbutt you. And they'll try to rifle through your pockets for the cookies. Alright, where was I?
It's got bananas in it.
It's certainly very strongly flavored, said Magrat, sipping hers cautiously. Has it got sugar in it, too?
Very likely,
said Nanny. She looked at Granny's middle-distance frown for a moment, and then picked up her pencil and licked the end professionally.
Anyway,
this is her letter writing.
One good thing is the drink here is very cheap. There's this one called a banana daiquiri, which is basically rum with a banana
footnote
in it.
The footnote reads, Nanny Ogg knew how to start spelling banana, but didn't know how you stopped. End of footnote.
Basically rum with a banana in it. I can feel it doing me good. It is damp here. I hope we find somewhere to stay tonight. I expect we shall, because Esme always falls on her feet, or at any rate on someone's feet. I have drawn a picture of a banana daiquiri. You can see it is empty right down to the bottom. Love, Mum, XXXX.
Drawn a picture of an empty banana daiquiri.
Banana.
That final banana. Banana. I think it has 4 nas in it. Banana. Yeah. I think that's the longest of the banana-na-na-nas. And she spelled daiquiri, D-A-K-R-Y. In the end, they found a stable. It was, as Nanny Ogg cheerfully commented, probably warmer and more hygienic than any of the inns, and there were millions of people in foreign parts who'd give their right arms for such a comfy, dry place to sleep. This cut about as much ice as a soap hacksaw. It doesn't take much to make witches fall out. More arguing incoming. Magrat lay awake, using her sack of clothes as a pillow and listening to the warm, soft rain on the roof. It's all gone wrong before we've even started, she thought. I don't know why I let them come with me. I'm perfectly capable of doing something by myself for once, but they always treat me as if I was a wet hen. I don't see why I should have to put up with her sulking and snapping at me the whole time. What's so special about her anyway? She hardly ever does anything really magical, whatever Nanny says. I feel like this should say all she really does, but it just says she really does just shout a lot and bully people. I see. I was reading it wrong. And as for Nanny, she means well, but she has no sense of responsibility. I thought I'd die when she started singing the hedgehog song in the inn. I just hope to goodness the people didn't know what the words meant. I'm the fairy godmother around here. We're not at home now. There's got to be different ways of doing things in foreign parts. She got up at first light. The other two were asleep, although asleep was too moderate a word for the sounds Granny Weatherwax was making. Magrat put on her best dress, the green silk one that was unfortunately now a mass of creases. She took out a bundle of tissue paper and slowly unwrapped her occult jewelry. Magrat bought occult jewelry as a sort of distraction from being Magrat. She had 3 large boxes of the stuff and was still exactly the same person. She did her best to remove the straw from her hair. Then she unpacked the magic wand. She wished she had a mirror to inspect herself in. "I've got the wand," she said quietly. "I don't see why I need any help. Desiderata said I was to tell them not to help." It crossed her mind to reflect that Desiderata had been very lax on that point. The one thing you could be sure of, if you told Granny Weatherwax and Nanny Ogg not to help, was that they would rush to help, if only out of spite. It was quite surprising to Magrat that anyone as clever as Desiderata should have slipped up on that minor point. She'd probably got a psycholology too, whatever that was. I might be throwing in an extra syllable or two. Psycholology. Psycholology, yeah. She'd probably got a psycholology too, whatever that was. Moving quietly, so as not to wake the other two, she opened the door and stepped lightly into the damp air. Wand at the ready, she was prepared to give the world whatever it wished for. It would help if this included pumpkins. Nanny Ogg opened one eye as the door creaked shut. She sat up and yawned and scratched herself. She fumbled in her hat and retrieved her pipe. She nudged Granny Weatherwax in the ribs.
"I ain't asleep,"
said Granny.
Magrat's gone off somewhere.
"Ha!"
And I'm going up to get something to eat,"
muttered Nanny. There was no talking to Esme when she was in that kind of mood. As she stepped out, Grebo dropped lightly off a beam and landed on her shoulder. Nanny Ogg, one of life's great optimists, stepped out to take whatever the future had to offer, preferably with rum and bananas in it. It is, just about 20 after 8? How's everyone doing? That was a nice scene break, preferably with rum and bananas in it. Na-na, 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 na. Daiquiri! Feeling lovely. That's nice. Sharkies are up for a bit more. That also seemed like a good beat. There's a few scene breaks ahead, so we're not stuck. I'm happy to hear you are feeling lovely, Lily Faye, because you are lovely. And it's nice to feel that self-affirmation. Alright, well, I'll go a little ways further. I thought I heard a puppy do a small bark. Did I? Did you bark? There's one phrase, I'm not going to say it, but there's one phrase I can say that will result in him barking. It's asking a certain question. It's just 3 words. Don't do it. It's sort of odd that this particular phrase gets him going. I don't know why it does. But if I say the words what, followed by is, and then ending with it,
he gets all riled up and starts barking. Sometimes I have to ask it a couple of times. You want a snack? And off he goes. Snack acquired. Retreat to the other room. I do not say it in a riling manner. How rude. Nobody would ever accuse me of riling. Alright. The house wasn't hard to find. Desiderata had made very exact notes. Magrat's gaze took in the high white walls and ornate metal balconies. She tried to straighten a few wrinkles in her dress, tugged some recalcitrant bits of hay from her hair, and then marched up to the driveway and knocked on the door. The knocker broke off in her hand. Looking around anxiously lest someone should have noted this vandalism, Magrat tried to wedge it back. It fell off, knocking a lump out of the marble step. Finally, she knocked gently with her knuckle. A fine cloud of paint dust lifted off the door and floated down to the ground. That was the only effect. Magrat considered her next move. She was pretty sure that fairy godmothers weren't supposed to leave a little card pushed under the door saying something like, "Called today, but you were out. Please contact the depot for a further appointment." Anyway, this wasn't the kind of house that got left empty. There would be a score of servants infesting a place like this. She crunched over the gravel and peered around the side of the house. Maybe the back door. Witches were generally more at home around back doors. Nanny Ogg always was. She was heading for the one belonging to the palace. It was easy enough to get into. This wasn't a castle like the ones back home, which expressed very clear ideas about inside and outside, and were built to keep the two separate. This was, well, a fairy tale castle, all icing sugar battlements and tiny towering turrets. Anyway, no one took much notice of little old ladies. Little old ladies were by definition harmless, although in a string of villages across several thousand miles of continent, this definition was currently being updated. Castles, in Nanny Ogg's experience, were like swans. They looked as if they were drifting regally through the waters of time, but in fact, there was a hell of a lot of activity going on underneath. That is a pretty good metaphor. Swans floating along regally, legs going. There'd be a maze of pantries and kitchens and laundries and stables and breweries. She liked the idea of breweries. And people never noticed another old biddy around the place, eating any spare grub that was lying around. Besides, you got gossip. Nanny Ogg liked gossip, too. Granny Weatherwax wandered disconsolately along the clean streets. She wasn't looking for the other two. She was quite certain of that.
Of course, she might just happen to bump into them, sort of accidentally, and give them a meaningful look. But she certainly wasn't looking for them. There was a crowd at the end of the street. Working on the reasonable assumption that Nanny Ogg might be in the middle of it, Granny Weatherwax drifted over. Nanny wasn't there. But there was a raised platform, and a small man in chains, and some bright uniformed guards. One of them was holding an axe. You did not have to be a great world traveler to understand that the purpose of this tableau was not to give the chained man a signed testimonial and a collection from everyone at the office. Granny nudged a bystander.
What's happening?
The man looked sideways at her. The guards caught him thieving, he said.
Ah, well, he looks guilty enough,
said Granny. People in chains had a tendency to look guilty.
So what are they going to do to him?
Teach him a lesson.
How do they do that, then?
See the axe? Granny's eyes hadn't left it the whole time. But now she let her attention rove over the crowd, picking up scraps of thought. An ant has an easy mind to read. There's just one stream of big, simple thoughts. Carry, carry, bite, get into the sandwiches, carry, eat. Something like a dog is more complicated. A dog can be thinking several thoughts at the same time. But a human mind is a great, sullen, lightning-filled cloud of thoughts, all of them occupying a finite amount of brain processing time. Finding whatever the owner thinks they're thinking in the middle of the smog of prejudices, memories, worries, hopes, and fears is almost impossible. But enough people thinking much the same thing can be heard, and Granny Weatherwax was aware of the fear.
Looks like it'll be a lesson he won't forget in a hurry, she murmured.
I reckon he'll forget it quite quickly, said the watcher, and then shuffled away from Granny, in the same way that people move away from lightning rods during a thunderstorm. And at this point, Granny picked up the discordant note in the orchestra of thought. In the middle of it were two minds that were not human. Their shape was as simple, clean, and purposeful as a naked blade. She'd felt minds like that before, and had never cherished the experience. She scanned the crowd and found the mind's owners. They were staring unblinkingly at the figures on the platform. The watchers were women, or at least currently the same shape as women, taller than she was, slender as sticks, and wearing broad hats with veils that covered their faces. Their dresses shimmered in the sunlight, possibly blue, possibly yellow, possibly green, possibly patterned. It was impossible to tell. The merest movement changed the colors. She couldn't make out their faces. There were witches in Genua, all right. One witch, anyway. A sound from the platform made her turn. And she knew why people in Genua were quiet and nice. There were countries in foreign parts, Granny had heard, where they chopped off the hands of thieves so that they wouldn't steal again. And she'd never been happy with that idea. They didn't do that in Genua. They cut their heads off so they wouldn't think of stealing again. Granny knew exactly where the witches were in Genua now. They were in charge.
Yeesh. I'm going to read one more page here, and then I think I'll call it for the night. Yeah?
Magrat reached the house's back door. It was ajar. She pulled herself together again. He knew. She knocked, in a polite, diffident sort of way. She said. A bowlful of dirty water hit her full in the face. Through the tidal roaring of a pair of ears full of suds, she heard a voice say, just checking the voice, "Gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was standing there." Magrat wiped the water out of her eyes and tried to focus on the dim figure in front of her. A kind of narrative certainty rose in her mind. "Is your name Ella?" she said. "That's right. Who are you?" Magrat looked her new-found goddaughter up and down. She was the most attractive young woman Magrat had ever seen. Skin as brown as a nut, hair so blonde as to be almost white, a combination not totally unusual in such an easy-going city as Genua had once been. What were you supposed to say at a time like this? She removed a piece of potato peel from her nose. "I'm your fairy godmother," she said. "Funny thing, it sounds silly now I come to tell someone." Ella peered at her. "You?" Yes. I've got the wand and everything." Magrat waggled the wand in case this helped. It didn't. Ella put her head on one side. "I thought you people were supposed to appear in a shower of glittering little lights and a twinkly noise," she said suspiciously. "Look, you just get the wand," said Magrat desperately. "You don't get a whole book of instructions." Ella gave her another searching look. Then she said, "I suppose you'd better come in then. You're just in time. I was making a cup of tea anyway."
Jesse Kuma, hello. You are popping in right as I was just about to finish. I just got to the break where I was saying I was going to wrap up for the evening. I'm sorry. How's it going? I can chat for a bit anyway. Our witches have made it to Genua, and then they split up to do their own things. Just wanted to say hi. Well, I appreciate that. What's new? How are things in Indiana? I want to say. How are things with you? I better summon the pup. Ben, come say hi to Jesse Kuma. Jesse Kuma. Or just, come have a snack, whatever. I'm about to go have a little dinner. Started Clash of Kings, finished Game of Thrones. Let me look at the names of the books again. It's been a while since I've read them. So you're on the third book? No, that's the wrong order. This is not in order. You're on the second book. How did you enjoy the first one? Are you feeling accomplished and having made it through? It's a good feeling, finishing a book. You liked the ending. Are you noticing anything, I don't know, different? Because you watched the show already. Sometimes a little bittersweet. Well, yeah, but there's still a solid, what? There's currently 5 books that are actually out. So 4 more to go in that particular series. And then 2 more that are forthcoming. Yeah, yeah. I'm hungry, Ben. I'm a little peckish. Sharkies. I've read a series of books before. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah. Because those books are very much like that. It changes from chapter to chapter which character you're in the perspective of. Which is another interesting thing. But yeah, it's all sort of following one character and then another. And I suppose you do see things kind of from their point of view. Who's your favorite character? I think mine was, what's her name? Let's see. It's one of the Starks. I think it's Arya. I think Arya was my favorite in the books. Oh, hey, yeah. Yeah, Arya I think was my favorite character. That was something that I didn't like about the books, is there's so many characters. And so and they're all, they've all got their own stories and whatnot going on. And so if there's one character whose story you really are enjoying and you want more of, and then that chapter ends, and it's like, who knows how long until you get back to that character again in some cases. Sometimes it's a real long time. There were definitely parts of Arya's story where I was like, I want to know what happens next. And, okay, well, now we're on Tyrion. Tyrion's interesting. Tyrion's cool, I guess. And now we're on Jaime. Well, I don't care about Jaime at all. And, etc., etc., etc. And then eventually it's like, okay, finally we're back to Arya. Or whoever. Not that they're, I wasn't interested in any of the other characters or anything like that. You'd get good chapters. But sometimes you get into a chapter of a character that you really don't care about, and you're like, ugh, can't skip it, but I might skim a little bit. No, I can't do that. It's an interesting point, Sharkies. Whale. Lily, are you still here? You usually have a good suggestion of someone I should raid out to. Applegate. Changed voice every book. I see. So different books from different characters' perspectives. Except for one book. Slightly ominous sounding. Thus. Oh. You found it. I have been getting... There are a few books I kind of want to start reading again, and also a bunch of comics too. There's a lot of stuff I want to read right now. Yeah, I've read a few series like that. What's the... There was one sort of young adult series that I am now drawing a blank on the name of anything related to. One of the characters' name was Briar Moss. Very, plant themed. It's not subtle. It was about, was it Circle of Magic or something like that? Part of what didn't work for the Divergent series was it was one character for the first two books, but the third switched between two, and they didn't sound different enough. That's interesting. Especially for a series called Divergent. Like, doesn't live up to the title then, does it? Oh, look at that guy. Sometimes you had to switch who you were picturing a few oh, because you weren't sure who it was supposed to be until something actually told you. That's tricky. That's tricky. Alright, well, I think I'm going to wrap things up. And go have some dinner. Some late dinner. 8:45. So I'll be back here. Next Wednesday is the 12th. Assuming that there's not anything weird going on with the house at that time. Yeah, from this point... Oh, thank you, Lily. Yeah, from this point, things are going to be a little bit up in the air as to how things are going to go from my streaming. Especially after next Friday, maybe including next Friday. And that I'm not going to know for sure. There might be... Like, I don't know at what point I'm going to pack my whole setup here up and put it away. So, and then, of course, next month, I'm not going to stream. I'm not going to be streaming at all because I'll be in Japan. I'll take lots of pictures. Try to let you all know how it goes afterwards. Maybe I'll do a stream where I just talk about Japan. But yeah, so we'll talk about that more next Wednesday, what the schedule is going to look like moving forward. Or more, what the schedule is not going to look like, because I really have no idea. All right. Well, have a lovely weekend, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I hope you have a good evening and a good weekend. Happy Easter if you're doing anything for that. Thank you, Sharkies. And hopefully I'll see you next Wednesday. All right. Good night, everyone. Bye.